Okay, we are live, I think.
Cheers.
Hope you all can hear us in the chat as per every single live stream ever. Checking audio, can people see and hear us? Hey Anne, hey Jack, hey James, Steve, Chris, good to see some familiar names.
Yeah, very familiar names and faces.
Justin, nice.
It's like the entire tribe showed up.
Yes, everyone's getting awesome.
Hey guys.
Nice, so you have 54 in the room.
We're going to give it a few minutes, guys, just to let everyone get in, and then we'll take it off.
But everyone here at the moment, meet Sacco. This is the man, the myth, the legend himself, and you've probably captured some of his incredible Webflow skills across Twitter. You may have even dived through his Webflow portfolio. And we are about to see how this man does what he does. So just going to give it a couple more minutes, wait for some more people to come in. We had about close to 200 people register. So just want to give everyone a chance to see all of it. And for everybody who's registered as well, the replay will be available. And also, yeah, we'll download it and put it onto YouTube so no one's going to miss it. So the format of this, we'll just going to start with like a brief intro and show you where you can find Sacco's work. And then we're just going to hand over the reins, and Sacco's going to take you through how he does what he does, in particular relation to the PlayStation project, which you may or may have not seen. With regards to with regards to any questions, I think we're going to try and let this one flow as much as possible. So we feel free to ask questions using the question tab rather than the chat. You can obviously use the chat if you want, but with questions, the questions get posted and other people can choose to upvote them if they like. But it's a good way just to not lose track of anything. Also, questions in the questions tab, and just make sure we don't miss them. And we'll probably take a couple of pauses and then ask any questions in the pauses, and then at the end we can get to questions also. So don't want to interrupt too much. I'm just going to let Sacco get on with it, because that's why everybody is here. Sure. But yeah, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them in the questions tab.
I'm thinking, what if we have all the questions written, and then at the very end, I can just go over each one of them, spend like 10 minutes just answering everybody at once.
Yep. Whatever you feel, mate. Yeah. Whatever you feel most comfortable with. Yep. Hey, Stephen. Hey, Justin. Ricky. Okay, 68 people in now.
Nice. We're still rolling
69.
in. Yeah, a little more time. Almost there.
Couple more minutes.
Yep.
Hey, Matthew. Hey, Glenn. Two Webflow extraordinaires in here.
It's actually crazy how easy it is now for an expert, a newcomer, and anybody to just share their skills and share what they've created instantly between each other. Like before, it was kind of reserved to a room where a JavaScript developer would sit down and then have everything in his own database. And then eventually you had, GitHub and everything show up. And now you can just literally copy an entire project and just hand it over. Be like, hey, what do you think, bro? That is nuts to me.
Absolutely.
Hey, Gary.
So how many, I presume we've got a pretty Webflow heavy audience in the chat right now.
I can also hear a few people that are new to Webflow that we convinced them to come over today. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, cool. Has anybody never used Webflow before? That's probably the first question. Okay, never.
Do you have a link?
Sacco, convince me, real beginner, want to see your work using it right now. Webflow noob. Okay, so this would be like throwing someone who can't swim straight into the deep end. So if you're a Webflow noob, we don't expect you to be able to create something like Sacco creates the first time you use Webflow, but this is purely to show off exactly what can be done with it.
So Justin is using Squarespace. So my goal today, my mission in life, is to convince Justin to move to Webflow. That's become my main goal tonight. It's like at the very end, I'm like, Justin, how do you feel after what you just saw?
Okay, perfect. Have a WordPress. Did I see a WordPress in there? Andrew, WordPress. Yep. Justin, WordPress.
I think each platform has its pros and cons. Obviously, I don't. We were just talking about this the other day, right, Tom? Like you can't expect everyone to use, let's say WordPress. Some people just want to have a template they want to set up in Squarespace. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. I think the comparison is where it gets annoying, where it's like you're kind of pitting each builder against each other, which is not. It's really comparing, oranges and pineapples. It just doesn't make any sense. So. Yeah.
So I think we have 74 people in here. Should we kick things off?
How many signed up?
Have about 190 signed up, but obviously cross time zones and lots of people watch these replays. Probably get about 50-50 from live to actually watching the replay. So I think this is pretty good. Okay, so before I hand over to Sarkis to actually dive into showing what he's done, Sarkis, would you mind taking a minute to explain your thoughts and feelings about Webflow, why you made the switch from previous platforms which other people might be currently using, and what do you like most about Webflow?
Sure. Yeah. So my background is web graphic designer. I've been using many different tools over the years. My dad spoiled me when I was 5 and got me onto Photoshop. I just got addicted just watching him doing what he does. He's a professional photographer. So I just realized at that point the freedom I had when I used Photoshop the first time was fucking brilliant. And then after that, I realized every other tool I started using just went further and further away from that freedom. So we went and started using, I tried to get into code and I realized I prefer, design. I prefer just an open canvas I can create on, and I used pretty much everything out there. And then a few years ago, I landed on Webflow. And at that point, I was using WordPress and Squarespace and kind of everything at that point. And when I saw just how easy it was to create an element, any kind of element I had in my mind, not just like a custom, here's a button, and let's put that into this page and then see what happens kind of thing, but it was just empty canvas. I'm not telling you what this is. I want you to tell me what this is kind of thing. And at that point, I just never went back. And ever since, I've been trying to find more and more difficult challenges to see what's not possible with this platform. And so far, aside from really heavy back-end server technologies or, really heavy features, like what MemberStack is doing right now, which is, again, getting pretty easy. It's getting easier and easier. Aside from that, I haven't come across one thing I can't build. And that is insane. I just did the recent Squarespace clone. You can find that in my portfolio. The reason I did that was to make a simple point that on Webflow, I could literally create all of Webflow inside of Webflow. On Squarespace, can you rebuild Squarespace's own homepage inside of Squarespace? It's really telling you this is the box and this is what you're supposed to do. And then if you want, you can pay $5,000 to somebody to come build a template, which is kind of, this takes away from the point of using Squarespace if I have to pay a lot of money to somebody to do it for me. But again, each tool has its beauty. Each tool is special in its own ways. And I think each of them served a particular demographic at a particular time. I remember 5-6 years ago, Squarespace really was important. It had a lot of things, but now from a designer standpoint, not a regular average Joe who just wants to create something simple. From a designer standpoint, I cannot think of one tool that can even compete, even briefly with Webflow in terms of just the customization that you have. And the fact that it's what you see is what you get on steroids, So, and now with the new features they've added, I remember people were saying e-commerce could never be possible. And then they added e-commerce. And then now the debate has changed to, well, they can never have profiles. And now MemberStack's here. I feel like over time, this is going to get so much easier and easier that the debate is going to change from, talking about tools to talking about products. The tools are going to be so simple eventually that, we're no longer going to be mesmerized by, wow, someone built this, and today I want to demystify Webflow as much as possible for everyone in the community to say, this is what you can do and here's how fast you can do it. What took me the most time building this wasn't actually the prototype. It was actually going through all the content because I didn't have a UI kit or anything for the PlayStation, so I had to manually build the whole thing, and that took time. And of course, going over every element meticulously to make sure that it works, make sure it feels the right way. That's what takes time. But usually when people look at some projects like this, they look at a Webflow website, they immediately start to look at the pixels and think, wow, this is so difficult. So I want to be able to simplify it today as much as possible.
Got it. Like it. Okay, so that's a pretty good testimonial for Webflow. Let's now hand it over to you, and just want to give a quick one-liner about what we'll be seeing today.
Okay, yeah, sure. So what I want to do is I want to kind of go over what this is first and foremost, how I approach Webflow, not just what it is, because I think the approach is very, very important. The second thing I want to do is map out which pages we're going to be going over. There's going to be specific sections that I'm going to be doing because this is a very, very big prototype. So I want to show a lot of it is duplicates. So if you think about the screens that appear when you go in, zoom, out, that's just basically the same feature, the same element that I've created with different content. So we don't need to go build every single one of those. But the primary elements in the PlayStation is obviously the login page. You can pick, your user and all that. Then you have the scrolling tab. We're going to do kind of the primary elements, and of course the main interface itself, the background interface, the music, the sound, the cursor, and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to be doing. And at the very end, we're going to have time, as much time as we need for the questions. So if you guys put it in the questions tab, I'll take a look at it at the very end so I don't get distracted.
Brilliant. And this is, just to confirm, this is the PS4 prototype.
Yes.
Which is from your Webflow. Okay, so here we go. If anyone wants to take a look, obviously you can see it in a second, but this is, I just posted the link in the chat, and that's on Sacco's Webflow. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen, Sacco, we'll knock off and let you take it from here.
Okay, sure. So first I want to give you a little intro on how I approach this. First of all, if you want to do anything, you need to kind of get into that mindset, right? Every industry requires a certain mindset, whether if you're in music, I come from a musical artistic family, like you need to approach music a certain way. It's not just, cold cut. Now in Webflow's case, when you approach it as just website design, I think that's where you end up in a trap where you think what's possible in web design. But if you think about it as this is essentially Photoshop for the web, then you unlock all your possibilities. So in Webflow's case, Webflow is often called a website builder, but at this point it's expanded so far that it really isn't a website builder. It's kind of a disservice to call it that. It would be sort of like, referring to it as just a website builder is kind of like suggesting that Photoshop is just a photo editing tool. So that's my main gripe with no code at the moment. I feel like we can change that together. So first, please think of Webflow, and it even looks like it. Think of it as Photoshop. It's a canvas. And that way, you will never fall into a trap again. You'll be able to think openly when you approach these projects. The next thing is, let's talk about code versus no code. Okay, this is very simple. The debate, very similar. We have a debate going right now: is which one is going to win, which is not fair. It reminds me of the 90s when we had character interface versus graphical user interface, right? And then Windows 95 came about, and that debate was over. People understood that, okay, this is the future. And of course, you have your purists, right? These developers who have spent decades, mastering something, and then here comes some kid who can just come and build this, and they can do it in a couple of days. That's of course gonna hurt, because it is very difficult, to really master anything. Whether, think about what Canva is doing right now, right? They're making it easier for anyone to be, quote unquote, a designer. They're using a template approach. They're letting you also use different elements. So you no longer, for a lot of the simple things, you don't have to use Photoshop anymore. And that's what Webflow is doing right now. It's simplifying everything to a point where most of the front end work will not be required anymore. You won't need to sit down and each time, figure out, the body and the tags and the classes and all that. You don't need to do that anymore. Now you can just go in, set it up visually, build it, and you're finished. And then whatever you build, you can hand it off to talented backend developer, and they can go, or a full stack developer, and they can go build in whatever other features that you can't. This collaboration between code and no code is the future. This idea that we're just going to replace all developers. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but Webflow happens to be hiring a lot of developers right now. They need developers. We need developers always. I mean, the real tools that need to be built, the real products that need to be built, I don't think you could ever do that with just no code. It's too sophisticated. You need, and if you can, that would be fantastic. But again, I think for a lot of the simple things that we need today, a lot of the interfaces we're building today, you definitely don't need to go and pay someone tens of thousands of dollars to do that. You know, I had personal, you know, friends, family who lost tens of thousands of dollars on some boutique design firm or something. I don't know what the fuck that even means, you know, like, and they built a website for them that I can build in like an hour right now in Webflow. So the debate, you know, when people look down on no code, I find that incredibly ignorant. They don't realize that we're not pointing fingers and saying it's not an either or proposition, right? It's not a zero-sum game. We are going to be working closer together. And the fact that anybody now, not just a designer, but a writer or, you know, someone who's in insurance or someone in music can just come and unleash their creativity on an empty canvas and then get other talented people who have different disciplines, whether they're in JavaScript or PHP or whatever, in other fields, and they're able to step in and take it to the next level. That's the future. So that's the future I want to help create. And that's why this year I decided I'm going to be going full into the no-code movement. My background is, you know, I've been working with a lot of different companies. I've created companies of my own, and companies have used my work and my prototypes to raise over $1 million. Like, so my main gripe in my own career is that I've had to work with a lot of private corporations and primarily with startups. But a lot of my skills were never able to get into the community. And to be honest, before, I never really felt like the community was that serious yet about no code. I saw a lot of basic examples, you know, people kind of playing with it and trying it out. And I did try to kind of share my work from time to time, but I didn't feel like it was resonating yet. But then this year, when Vlad shared the PS4 prototype and I saw, you know, how many amazing developers there are now in the community that I never had a chance to meet or connect with, I said, this is the time. There's a time we can go in, full in. It's really in our hands where this movement goes next. I really believe that, which is, I'm hoping that many developers are going to start showcasing very serious examples of what's possible. And there are projects right now on Webflow, for example, that just smoke anything that I've done, and they only have like 15 views. You know, we don't see these examples, so that's why when developers come in and they check it out and they're like, okay, what is this tool? And they just see a few basic things, they start to assume that, okay, you know, this is a very basic tool. This isn't really, you know, what the feature is, and so on and so forth. So this PS4 prototype was my way of shutting down that debate. The way that Windows 95 came in and just shut down the debate. It said graphical user interface, get used to it. And my proudest moment actually was, out of all the messages I received, feedback and support, which I really appreciate, the best message I received was from like a 10, 20-year veteran full stack developer who said, dude, how did you do that? And I said, now my mission is accomplished. I was able to prove that this is not just, you know, a basic website builder. So that's the main thing. Now, what's the greatest feature of Webflow? The feature that we're going to be using today to build this. Clonability. For some reason, even though that's the primary feature, that's one of the top features of Webflow, it's the least used feature in Webflow. You know, and I feel that that does a real disservice to this platform. The fact that before you had to go through this lengthy process of copying code over and attaching it to the server and all this kind of stuff, and you have to just to set up something simple. Now someone can build, like in my case, the PS4 prototype, and you can just copy one div that has all these layers stacked in it, take it to another canvas and paste, and it's done. And this ability to share and collaborate is reminding me of the music industry. It's the music industry all over again, remixing. Right? Before you had to have a band and, you know, 100-piece orchestra and whatever, and then someone just comes along, takes these tracks, you know, mixes the vinyls up and creates a new song. And people call that illegal. And now if you don't use samples in your music, it's kind of weird. So I find it kind of weird when companies are very private and closed. They don't want to really share a lot of their ideas. I even created a really massive prototype for one company, and they wouldn't even share it with everyone in the team. It kind of defeats the purpose of creating something like that. And I feel like with Webflow is tackling the industries in so many ways. It's changing attitudes. And people don't really realize that yet. I don't think even a lot of people in Webflow realize that yet. So I'm hoping that me and many other designers around the world, better than me, would be able to demonstrate these features and these trends a little better. So I think clonability is going to be defining the next decade. I think everything is going to be cloned. Everything is going to be easily shared between each other. And I can't even wait for that. What's going to be the future? What's the hardest thing that's coming? It's going to be creating products. Now you can actually focus on the product creation side, not just developing the website. A lot of the time I hear this, like, we spent 200K, building our prototype, MVP, whatever, and it's a website. And then they start focusing on the product. How am I going to build this? How is it going to work? How is it going to look? So now I think Webflow and products like this are making it so much easier to just create whatever you have in mind really fast, that you now have no excuse to create a bad product. Now, if it's a bad product, it's not because of your developer or because of your designer or because of your copywriter. It's because of you. It's because of your vision, which is why my slogan, the one phrase that kind of defines my life and everything I do, is vision is everything. Now vision is not just something you see or it's a mission statement on your website. It's who you are. It's why you do this. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that, wow, now it's getting difficult. Now I have to really think about why I'm doing this. So that's going to be fun. And I think over time, in the next year or two, I think a standard is finally going to be set on, like, this is how it's done. This is how products are created. The last 20 years has been really just everybody getting used to the web. Now we're going to create the web together and make it beautiful together, as they say. So let's talk about web design versus prototyping. I think there's another thing that we need to establish before we jump into this. Web design, creating a website, your expectation is that someone's going to log in, take a look at it, they're going to like what they see, and hopefully click around. Creating a prototype is an art form. It's not a mock-up. Most of the prototypes, quote unquote, that you see on internet, they say like a prototype of this, prototype of that, is not actually a prototype. These are mock-ups. They're in Vision or Proto.io or something like that. And you're able to have some basic functionality, click here, click there. But a real prototype is a product that is a prototype, but you do a double take when you see it. You don't believe that it's not real. So I would say web design is more about what you see, because their attention span is so low that you just have to show them something, get their attention, which is why a lot of websites just use background videos. That's the easiest way, right, to get people's attention. We're all guilty of that. But with prototypes, you have to make it. I'm not going to just click on it real quick. I already know why I'm here. You're demoing a product for me, right? So this is why what I've noticed is a lot of people with the prototype, they were doing a double take. Like, is this the PS4? Is this hooked up to an API or something? Because they couldn't believe that it was just a prototype. It built inside of a completely third-party, external tool. And to demo this and to test to make sure that my prototyping works, I actually brought a friend over, and then I told him that I'm hooking up the PS4. I'm doing a remote play, to my TV, and I put my computer in front of him, put it full screen, and he started playing with it. And then some of the features weren't working. He went on a whole rant about the PS4 and how remote play sucks. He didn't realize that it's a prototype, and that's where I realized that's a good thing. It's also really scary. You could use this, potentially someone could use this for phishing or phishing accounts or whatever. So that's why I had to put up a disclaimer, and I couldn't clone this. I didn't want to make this clonable, just in case people use it for the wrong reasons, because they absolutely can. So this is primarily what companies pay me for. That's the my main focus has been for the last few years, is just building this for companies, helping them express their ideas really fast. And allowing them to save a tremendous amount of money, being able to just take their idea, and in a week someone like me can go ahead and put that whole thing up, and let them customize every single element whenever they like. That is incredible. And that's why I think today, just to focus so much on websites, building landing pages, coming soon pages, is actually real disservice to this platform. And so let's change that together. Let's talk about the box philosophy. Now let's jump in. Let's dive in gradually. To be able to do this, you have to stop thinking about pixels. Just stop completely. When you're looking at a poster, let's say, you're noticing pixels. Okay, this is nice, this is beautiful. When you look at a website, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed and to immediately start thinking, well, how they do that element or this other element. But in reality, if you understand that everything is just a div, a box within the box within the box within the box, you can create absolutely anything. And I think that's where most of the intimidation comes in. Looking at it and thinking, well, how's it floating in? How's it floating out? You know, so that's where the magic tricks come in. You know, I call these magic tricks. You know, someone called me a Webflow magician. I mean, it's kind of true. Like, that's really what we do. We're able to just make you feel a certain way and make you think this was difficult, when in reality, the trick is actually really simple. So my goal today is I'm going to show you how this is done, and you're going to be able to see just how easy it is. And I'm hoping that a week after this, you can send me a prototype that you've built that you felt was really difficult. And then if you're able to do that, then I'll know that I was successful. So let's jump in, right? Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, yeah, sorry about that, guys. Let me turn off the notification sound. I didn't see that. How do I do this real quick? Let me see, settings. Next actions. Sorry guys, new to this. Okay, let me go and share my screen and we can get started. All right, there we go. So this is what we're going to be creating inside Webflow. This amazing zoom effect. All right. So here I have two separate accounts, separate windows. We are going to be able to switch between them and create separate elements as we go. So let me just pin this so it doesn't bother us. And here we go. So let me open up the prototype. Sec. There we go. Okay, so let's jump in. All right. Let's go ahead and mute this real quick. All right. Can everybody know? Good to go? All right. Let's jump in. So let's start by mapping out what we're seeing here. All right. So here we have a window, the intro window, with a disclaimer, which I have. And what we've done is when you click, it automatically pops in. So what we're going to do is I've already picked a few pages that we're going to create together, and then we'll go do that one by one. But I want to first of all start by just showing you like how all these containers come together. So first of all, here we have the logo, which is just one image set to absolute and just push to the left. It's really that simple. And it's stuck there, it's fixed. Over here we have just one div just for the text. We have one container, actually, one text field, and then you have the main PlayStation button that just has a very simple looping animation for the button. When you click on it, the rest of the elements come in. So here, we already have a footer, which is, again, set to absolute, fixed to the bottom, with just 3 buttons inside of it, and each one has its own interactions. Here, we have a container, just a separate div, set to a particular width. I believe it's 250 pixels. And what I've done is, when you click on any one of these elements, automatically just closes. So again, you assume that when I click on it, something's actually happening. But no, it's very simple. Click in, click out. And you can just set that interaction to the entire page, essentially. So I can just either click here, here, or anywhere else on the screen, and we're good to go. but you start to feel like, wow, he built an options menu. So that's my point. It's really, from a design standpoint, there's actually nothing difficult. The real difficulty is telling that story. So let's jump in. Here, before we go to the big kahuna, we're going to start with new user. Here, what we have is a simple interaction just flowing in, hiding the other one. So it just zooms out. The other window zooms out. You hide it. And then this window zooms in. And you have two options here. So there are many ways you could do this. You could just create a div and create two, 3 stacking divs with it. Here, so you have one for this one, another one for play as a guest, and you have a text field for the notification over there at the bottom. You could grid. So what I'm trying to demonstrate right now is that there isn't one right way to do this. So don't fall in that trap. I fell in that trap too, of like doing it wrong. No, everything's fine. As long as what you've created is responsive and it feels right, you're good to go. So here we're going to go through some other custom elements here. So for example, this mouse that we created is custom. You need just one line of custom code, very small line, just for one, to solve just one problem, which is I can make this cursor move around the screen, but when I click on an element, it doesn't get to touch that element because this mouse cursor that we've uploaded, this PNG, is actually an element as well. So you just need like one line of code to just make that element invisible. Visible on your screen, but invisible from a coding development standpoint. So here, let's go into create as user. We don't need to click on play as a guest. That immediately takes you into the prototype. So we're going to go to create a user. Here we have a simple box where we have all this text laid out, and all I've done is hide the scroll bar, so you don't see that because that's going to cut you away from the prototype experience. And you have two options. You can say do not accept and accept. So if you say do not accept, just goes back. If you click on create a user, it goes in. I can click on accept. And every screen you're seeing right now, guys, is all what you see in the PS4. And this is what I mean by meticulously creating a prototype. This is a prototype. And out of the prototypes I've created, actually, this is the simplest of them. Like companies pay me, tens of thousands specifically to build out their entire software suite visually to pixel perfection, from everything down to like the error message of like what would happen if the user accidentally clicked here. So then they can either use this to raise investment, or they can use this to impress, test out ideas, maybe get some users. You could easily, if the PS4, I would love for Sony to reach out to me and say, why don't you create the PS5 interface, before we launch it, because we can get so much feedback from our users. Unfortunately, companies are too busy competing with each other, and as a result, the users get hurt. So here we have the PlayStation Network. You can sign up for it. So yep, we can go in, and here you'll notice, you can easily, forget, if you forgot your password, you can easily set that up. You take care of that. Get a reminder. It's just a bunch of fields. Here, if you want to join, I've set it up completely, so you can just sign in, and you can do your thing. You can also create an account if you want. Do that account creation page. We won't waste too much time here. Let's take a step back, shall we? Let's go ahead and skip. When we skip, you come in here, and you're able to basically pick which avatar you want to create. So in this case, we'll pick the panda. And you can just give it a name. So say, panda, let's say, and you're good to go. So inside of it here now, we're going to just click on it. And there you go. So see, now you already have 3 of them. Easy to go. So here, what are we looking at in terms of the boxes? Again, everything is a box within a box. At the top, overall, we have basically this container, this giant section that we've created, because everything in the website is in basically one section. There are no multiple pages. We're able to essentially center everything, vertically align it, and then have one element for the DualShock wireless controller, and then have one div that's horizontally aligned, and having these 3 divs within. And the idea with the interaction is when I hover on TechVizier, find me on the PlayStation Network if you're there, that's me. If you hover on the panda, this entire box, this container essentially, this div, is moving to the left by a certain percent or by pixels, whatever you feel comfortable with. In this case, I think it's about 50 pixels. It's just going to the left and then going back to the right. And in just a few minutes, we were able to cover essentially half of the prototype. That's what I mean by now it's not really the web development part that's difficult. It's really the vision of like, okay, what do I want the user to experience? How are they going to feel about this? And I think that's the question people don't ask enough. How am I going to feel? Not how is it going to look? I'm tired of the look. My main, gripe with a lot of dribble posts that come up, for example, they're stunning. I mean, I love the design work in it. But when you think of it from a user standpoint, it doesn't make any sense. You would never use that interface, and that's why I feel like at this point, Webflow is going to enable, and not just Webflow, but excuse me, a lot of tools like Glide and Adalo and these other tools, and Makerpad is doing a fantastic job, curating all of these tools. We're going to be able to completely dismiss the question of how it looks. How it looks is a given. It needs to look good, of course. I mean, I don't want to walk out of my house in my underwear unless I'm in, at the Fire Festival or something. But in this case, it's really about very simple interface, but how does it feel? Now, let's talk about that just a little more from a prototyping standpoint. To be able to do this kind of work, you, of course, lay out the elements, but then you have to go to the source, in this case, the PS4, and actually manually play with every element and understand, like, okay, how does it actually feel? Like, how long does it take for this element to show up? How long does it take to hide? When you get that experience and you understand how it works, then you can do this. Then you can create prototypes, and then I think there's this whole new market that's opening up for prototyping, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to make careers out of this, the way that I did for many years. So I'm really looking forward to that. So please challenge yourselves. Please try to recreate not just Apple.com or a Squarespace or something like that, but actually create games. Move forward, move ahead. And there's nothing more satisfying than creating something like this and just having thousands of people, wonder how you did it and getting them to connect with you and collaborate with you. I'm humbled by that. And I think the reason a lot of people end up distressed and they end up through a lot of things they're going through is because they don't create. Human beings were designed to create, and you need tools like this to do that. So I'm really grateful to everyone who's worked on anything no code. This is really liberating for millions of people. So let's jump in now, without further ado. Before we do, sorry, 1 second. If we go into play as a guest, I want to show you something that I fed in. Let me just restart the prototype real quick. Let's jump in. Here we go. There, by the way, did you notice how it took like 2 seconds before the page loads in? That's not a mistake. That's on purpose. It could have just been like, bam, it's in your face. But I actually sat down and meticulously calculated, like, okay, so here is how many seconds it takes before the PlayStation loads, on the PS4 Pro. So it's the little details that make you feel like this is real. It's not actually the main interface. It's not the video in the background. That's easy to do. It's the little things. So please focus on the details. And I think these techniques that I'm about to show you are going to apply anything else that you do within Webflow, outside of Webflow, or even outside of the web. Just detail-oriented approach is very important. So let's jump into play as a guest again. And here, when you sign in with smartphone, there was a feature here where it says, and you have this many seconds to be able to, connect your PlayStation Network account to, that particular PS4 to log in, right? To start using the smartphone app. And so I had to use a little bit of custom code to have that integration done. So it's the little things again, like you could have the cursor or that little, the numbers coming down. When you're building a prototype, please go the extra distance. Show the customer that you really thought about this, like you really went the full way, that even if no one notices, you notice. Paint the back of the fence, not only the front of the fence. And I feel like in a lot of websites even, people forget that, someone might actually click on the sitemap. They might actually click on terms of service. Make that a good experience. Don't just, slap it there because, it's not a video, because it's not something fancy or it's not a fancy, animation. Focus on everything. Let's go back. So this is another little technique. there are elements in the prototype that you're going to notice for PlayStation users. You're going to notice that is a little different. But because I went through so much detail in the prototype, when I actually change something like the text in this column to make it a little more user-friendly, you're not even going to notice that because you're so used to the interface now. It already feels like you're at home. And that's the real challenge. When you're creating a product, a prototype for a company, it could be a Fortune 500 company, for example, you know, a few I've worked with, like if they need a particular prototype, no one's ever seen it before. So you're just going to go ahead and just assume that, you know, I'm going to create it first time. It's going to look good. I give it to them. I get paid. But when you're creating something like the PS4 or SoundCloud or Squarespace, something like that, millions of people use these tools every day. So they're going to be watching what you do like a hawk, and they will notice very easily if something is off. So I'm really proud of the fact that a lot of these PS4 gamers, I'm sure there are a few PS4 gamers right here in the chat today, actually didn't find those mistakes. And in this case, it's not actually a mistake. As a PS4 gamer, I freaking hate some of the things that PlayStation does. So, you know, in this case, this column is actually supposed to be this big. They put a freaking, I don't know, paragraph in there just for login and appear online, you know, like just simplify it, you know, and go from there. So this is me telling off Sony a little bit. So let's jump in now, guys, without further ado. Boom. All right, so what do we see here? We see a little div right up here, just floating in, floating out. This is just a basic interaction. You just set it up at, you know, when user clicks on Tech Vizier, this is what happens. It floats in, stays for like, you know, 5-10 seconds and floats out. Very simple. Next, we have a div, a container at the top that we have, you know, for the nav bar. And below it, we have, and by the way, it's set absolute to the top. So it's just fixed no matter what happens at the bottom. So none of the elements are, you know, overlapping each other or bothering each other. So that's great. And I think absolute is your friend. It's your best friend. When you're creating a lot of these elements, people usually spend so much time on the grid and flexing and whatever, when you could just take full control of that element, just say, buddy, you need to be there and stay there. I don't want you to go anywhere. So use that when you can. In the middle, we have the primary feature of the PlayStation, the shining glory. We have the ability to go through each of these panels. Now, notice how these panels are actually the same effect that you have on the login screen. It's the same Tech Vizier Panda approach, just floating backwards and forwards. Very easy to go, very easy to do. The real difficulty, complexity here is they have to change their size when they go backwards and forwards. And I mean, obviously, the king of this, the one who actually, I think, made this really popular is Netflix. Now, so many companies use this Netflix approach when they have a lot of products they want to showcase. In this case, we have to change the size, and we have to also move all the containers proportionally. Now, this seems easy, but think about when you're hovering, right? Imagine when you're hovering here, and then you hover here, automatically everything just starts jumping around really fast. So the user experience is terrible. And this brings me to my next point, which is when you're building if you're cloning something like the PS4, and you know, next I'm working on the Xbox, and you want to replicate it, you're not going to be able to replicate it, you know, pixel by pixel, because this is obviously a website, right? You don't have a controller. And by the way, let's add that to the feature list, the ability to control the websites with your own PS4 controller. That'd be awesome. So if Vlad can hear me, why don't you add that to the wish list? So next, we have the panel at the bottom. So when I click, the panel needs to slide up. And then when I click again, it needs to slide down. So, and then you have my favorite part of all this, the actual game, the footage. And this is all 4K resolution, beautifully set up. And really all it is a YouTube video. But I'm going to show you some techniques of how you can actually make it feel like it's all uploaded into Webflow, like this is not a YouTube video. And this is going to help you trick, and I say this in a good way, of course, trick your user into feeling your experience. People at this point have seen so many goddamn websites that subconsciously, you know, when someone says, I don't like that design, they can't even explain why they don't like the design because their brain has just been essentially pummeled with visual content. Like there's so many goddamn websites just coming in all the time. So this is why I think product design and web design in general is going to become much, much more difficult over the years. The same way that music creation now is very easy, right? Software is not the hard part. You know, there are kids using GarageBand. You know, Skrillex famously, you know, used basic tools like that to create his first album, and it exploded. You know, so now the talent and the skill is what it comes down to. It is really becoming meritocracy, and I fucking love that. So, you know, more power to all creators. So here what I've done is I've essentially taken a YouTube video and I've set it to a particular portion. I've set it to a particular time. So it feels like you're already in the game, right? That's how the PS4 is. Like if you zoom out of the game, you come out of the game and you want to maybe check something else, check some notifications, something, it pauses right where you are. And then when you jump in, it resumes. So this is how I was able to kind of use that technique to trick you, to make you feel like, wow, the game's already playing. And I'm really glad the PS4 did that feature. Otherwise, it would give away that this is actually a static, you know, this is just a video. And I apologize to everyone who thought it was actually the game. They feel bad that I didn't rebuild God of War in Webflow. Maybe I'll get there at some point. At that point, I'm probably going to be the God of War. I'm going to be so pissed with how much time was spent on it, but I'm looking forward to it. So next we have the panels at the bottom over here. Notice how, again, just stacked, we have a grid broken into two parts, and you don't even have to use the grid. You could just have essentially one container or one section and break it into, use the flex for this. And you can have horizontally flex, of course, and you can have two divs that have these elements stacked into it. So again, really simple. What do we see here? We see a box. I see a little panda box. I see text. I see a big box. Then I see 3 boxes with other 3 boxes below it, and then a larger box above it. So when you just forget, just dismiss with the title that this is a PlayStation or this is a whatever, at that point, you become a web designer. That's when you become a prototyper. That's when you can do what I do. And I would really want you to. I want you to challenge yourself. So please do that. Next, we have the store here. Boom. I apologize for a little bit of lag. Here we have essentially, again, just for this, I used grid. This is much easier when you, with the grid layout. So I could just essentially break it into 1, 2, 3, 4. It's essentially 4 parts. And from there on, you just break it into 4 parts horizontally. That's it. And now you can just take your panel, create a panel over it, put a picture in it, add a little stroke, you know, a little hover effect. It's not even interaction. It's just a hover effect. And then you apply the same effect to all of them. And that's it. And at the bottom here, we have this lone little button, and it clicks back up. Simple as that. Let's go into the nav bar. So nav bar, ladies and gentlemen, was the real pain in the ass building this thing, because here you have this effect. Notice how when I click on it, right, goes in, goes out. I mean, this is easy, but I have to make it zoom up, zoom down, you know, like that is really, really annoying. And you're going to understand because, first of all, I had to set up a time. So I don't know if you noticed, but actually the timer, I put just a couple of lines of JavaScript, and you can, this time is tied to your device. So you're going to be able to, that gives you that extra believability that you have in the PS4. So it doesn't matter what time zone you open this website in, it's going to be perfectly tuned. And that's already going to give you, you know, a little bit of confusion. Like, okay, this feels a little real. This feels a little awkward. Next, we have the elements here, just a little bit of a hover effect. A few elements over here, simple as that. And here you have hidden elements. So those little boxes, those other icons that appear, they're just hidden in there. So it's simple as that. So you click, appears, grows up, and that's pretty much it. Now, for each of them, they all have texts. So to make it simpler, I just made a hover effect, because I know you're not going to really use this on your iPad or whatever, which you can. It looks actually fantastic on the iPad. I developed this on my iPad Pro. Most of my testing is done on my iPad Pro. It's fantastic for that. And when you hover, you have essentially panels that keep changing. So you have the title at the top, again, fixed, fixed is your friend. You have the text in the middle, and then as you hover through, it just goes through. There it is, and then you have your panels. A little trick I did again was I'm assuming from a user standpoint, to save time, I didn't create every single panel. Like, there's just a lot of iconography, whatever, that could be in this panel. I didn't do that. What I did was I assumed that this user just doesn't have notifications, doesn't have friends, does not have a life. So it's a very lonely gamer. And then when you actually click on them, it takes you to their individual panels. And again, what do we see? We see a box, a box, a box, 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 and a grid. Simple. Let's go back. Finally, let's go into their settings. All right. So here we have, again, the settings panel. Again, all these boxes that are here are exactly the same. It's one class. The only thing that's changing is the little icon inside and the title. Next, we're going to have the power options. And I want to show you one important feature here that can save your life when you're prototyping. So because there's so many interactions in this prototype, I mean, just hundreds of them, I don't even know how I was able to swerve through all of them at once, because you change one interaction and you have to go, and it creates a ripple effect. It affects everything. So in this case, I wanted to have an effect where you enter rest mode, okay? You click on it, screen goes dark, you have a power button, click on it, takes you back into the prototype. That was nice, that was a cute idea, except you have to reset every interaction perfectly set it up after the user has just fooled around with all the buttons and everything. And then when they click, it restarts all the animations the way we're supposed to be. That is a pain in the ass. And I've noticed, when I was building this prototype, I milked Webflow. I mean, literally punished it with the amount of, features, interactions I put in there. So I'm not going to make this a very advanced masterclass. Some of these things are just tricky as hell. Like, I'll give you just one example, and then we can go into the other page and we can start building some of these components together. I just want to give you a really thorough explanation so you see where I'm coming from. So I hope I didn't bore you. I set up one line of JavaScript again to just basically reload the page. Simple as that. And my saving grace, the reason I could get away with it, is because Webflow is super fucking fast. You are able to, I'm shocked by how it can just load all these elements like this, and then what it does is it separately, as you hide and show each element, it starts to load them individually. That is incredible to me. I was just talking to a client literally a couple of days ago, and he was demoing, like he was saying, I want to move my website from WordPress to Webflow. And it literally took, I shit you not, 40 seconds to open up a simple product page. It took us 1 second to open up this page. And if that alone doesn't impress you as a web designer, I don't know what will, So I'm not paid by Webflow, by the way. I'm just really loyal to tools that have changed my life. And this one particularly has. So I'm very happy about that. Now here, with the logout of PS4, switch users, power options, stuff like this, this is not difficult stuff. These are just very identical panels, so I didn't want to waste my time. And obviously, I wasn't building this for Sony. I'm not being paid for this. Yeah, typically, to build something like this, I would be charging no less than $5,000 to $10,000. And I don't charge my clients hourly. I charge them fixed. And my rates completely vary based on who I work with, who they are, their projects I did completely for free, because I really love the client and I thought they really needed this. In the case of the PS4, this can change the entire development process at Sony. So, that's why prototypes are so important, and they're going to be the next premium, let's say, industry. That's where people are going to pay the big bucks, not for landing pages. Once people figure out that, wow, someone can build my whole coming soon page or my whole homepage, the entire Squarespace homepage in basically like 5 hours, they're going to just get a heart attack and realize, no, we're not going to be paying that much anymore. So Freelancer, Upwork, all these websites are about to go through a giant switch, and I think it's a welcome grace. Let's go into rest mode, and notice how you have this loading icon. This is not a GIF. ladies and gentlemen, I built that custom. I'm very proud of that. And I wanted to do as much as I could custom to just show like how this is possible. And when we use things like HTML embed, usually people think this is for like really complicated stuff. Like that's when you use it. But actually, use it for the details. Use it for the details, like the timer, like the this particular thing icon here. Like just being able to reload the page and so on and so forth. Use it for that. That's going to really help you take your page to the next level. I'm actually creating. If you follow me on Webflow, I am creating a template right now that's going to feature a lot of these tricks, a lot of these elements. Like, for example, the snippet over here, this custom code. And I want to create essentially a library of this stuff because they really are simple. And you can integrate them like that. That's really fun. You don't have to be an experienced developer by any means. So let's go ahead and click in. Boom. You see how fast that was? You didn't even notice. You didn't even notice that the website reloaded. So let's use that kind of, those type of techniques. So before I continue, guys, I want to take a look and see if you have any questions here real quick. Before we continue, how are we doing? Okay. All right, good. We'll tackle this later on. These are really good questions. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, let's go in. Let's roll up our sleeves. Here we are. Now, I'm going to show you now the structure in Webflow, particularly how this works. Now, the main challenge when I was building this was actually laying out every element in one page. Like I said earlier, it's not just interactions. It's being able to control every element. Like, okay, here's this page, and here's that page, and here's the other page. So that was really the annoying part. And once you get over that, get over that hurdle, it becomes pretty straightforward. So what we're going to be building is, to go back real quick, we are going to be creating this first screen. We're going to create that intro. You jump in, jump out. You're going to have the main login page. So we can have just these two, how we do these interactions. Have the options menu. We're also going to have this panel over here. Now, every other panel inside is essentially just a copy of it. So I don't want to waste too much time going over that. We're also going to, maybe we could do some of this. So we'll see how it goes. We'll play by ear. And I don't want to take too much of your time either. Let's jump in here. We're going to have these three sections we're going to create. We're going to create this one, this little element on the left, the notification. We're going to create the bar at the top, the middle, and then the panel at the bottom. So it's just going to appear and disappear. I'm not going to be focusing too much on making everything, pixel perfect or anything. This is going to be, again, playing it by eye, making sure that you see everything, you see how it comes together, and then you're going to be able to go and piece it one by one. So let's go back. What we have here in the structure is the cursor at the very top. So what we want to do is we want to set this to absolute. So it's above everything, this particular container. And inside of it, the icon itself needs to be set at the highest Z index so that it doesn't fall behind any other elements. But by the way, that's actually a good trick. If you want to kind of hide when it's hovering over a button, for example, or it's hovering over a div or something like that, that's actually a great technique. Just put the other box above it, so then this mouse icon just falls behind it when you're hovering. It's still attached to your cursor, but no one can see it. So that's pretty cool. Next, we have the power on. That's the button that we saw in the end, so that's already hidden. You're not seeing that right now. We have the preloader, which is this screen. And in the preloader, we have the black container, the overall div. And again, there are many ways to do this, guys. So feel free to do it any way you like. The one kind of liberty you have when you're building software prototypes like this is you can essentially get away with a lot of things. This doesn't have to be fully responsive or something. I like to build everything. I like everything to be responsive as much as possible. But when you feel like this is primarily desktop experience, and this is a desktop only kind of prototype, don't worry about that kind of stuff too much. Still follow best practices, but you can take some liberties. Okay, so we have the black. So again, what is this? Just set a Z index, so it's just higher than the other screens. We give it 100% width, 100% height, so it's just laid out correctly. We're going to go ahead at the bottom, just give it a black background, and that's it. That's just the box. And I'm going to be using the word box a lot today. So I really want to get that box philosophy across. Here we have the main trigger. So when people click on this trigger anywhere in the background, not the overall black, but on this particular element, which is set to a z-index of 1, they're going to be able to immediately start the prototype, start the animations and everything. The reason I had to do that and come up with a creative solution for this is because I had to put up the disclaimer, and I also want the user to be able to click on my name and click on to go to my profile and to also go learn more about Webflow. So that's why I had to kind of I couldn't automate the PS4 completely. I'm a little bummed out about that, because when you don't see that disclaimer and it just starts automatically, that does leave a better first impression. But this is good. So inside of this box, again, vertically aligned, very simple. You don't have to use the grid and everything. I know people love to just use grid for everything. You don't really have to. Just simple, simplify it. Use flex. Flex is really fast for elements like this, so just go for that. You don't need wrapping or anything like that. Just vertical, aligned center, justified center, good to go. We have a logo. We're going to be just, I added interaction. So you can click anywhere really to start the trigger. You'll notice that some of these elements are located above the trigger. So if I click on the PS, it's not going to start. You see, it says tap and enjoy. So what if someone clicks here, or like right there by accident, then it's not going to start. So that's going to piss them off. So we're not going to do that. We don't want to piss anyone off. Here we have the disclaimer, which again is just a paragraph. And then if you want to highlight a particular element and say, I want this particular, let's say the Sony to take you to the Sony website, I can just come in, select this, give it a link, and just type in Sony.com. Open it in the web, finished. Now we have Sony as well. And if I need to, I need to make this the same class, for example, make it the same color, whatever, just go ahead, link 3, for example, and finished. Simple as that. So I know a lot of this stuff, for professional Webflow developers and stuff, this is, some of this stuff is, obviously stupidly obvious for you. So, but I want to make sure that we have an experience for everybody and they all kind of see how this comes together. So bear with me. Then we have, after the preloader, we have the login screen. So let me go ahead and hide the preloader. Here we have, okay, so in the login screen, we have, like I was mentioning before, let me just do this real quick. Okay, we have the PS4. We're giving it a height of 60 and just giving it some margin. So it's 50 on the left, 50 at the top. And we're setting it absolute to the top left, giving a z-index of 10. So it's above all of these elements here. And we're good to go. Simple as that. Next, below it, we have the intro slide, which is this slide right here. So notice what it is, 100 VH. VH is your friend. It just sets everything perfectly, no matter what the screen is, window height. So that's perfect. So you can set the intro. You can have the title in there. Very simple. So again, everything is center aligned. There's nothing special here. One line of text, and then the PS button. On the PS button, we have one simple interaction that's looping, just growing in, growing out, growing in, growing out. Why? Because this is a mouse-based experience. The user is going to be using a mouse. So you want to kind of indicate like where they need to click, how it's going to work. And, don't assume that your user is just, it's obvious. Don't do that. You'd be surprised by how many things people don't notice. The fact that Webflow created clonability and people are still figuring out in February 6th, 2020, kind of gives you an idea of how, the attention spans of users. So now we can go ahead and hide the intro. Let's go into profiles, profile selection, boom. What did I tell you earlier? We have a div, click on it. Inside of it, we have some text and just a bit of margin at the bottom. So 50, good to go. Create a div, and then right below it, we have a wrapper. And this wrapper is going to be for all the elements inside of it. So this is going to be the cards. And notice how I set the third card to invisible. But when I open it, I just show it. Notice how the wrapper just automatically expands. Why? Because I didn't set a width or a height for the wrapper. It's just a regular div. So you just go ahead, open it, hover, good to go. So I'm going to hide this panda for now. We don't actually need the panda right now. And we're going to hide this panel, the profiles panel. And we're going to jump to add user. That's the plus. And here, again, what do we see? We see a giant div. Again, same 100%. You can do 100% height as well, or 100 VH, pretty much same thing. For some elements, using 100% doesn't exactly work. You have to set 100 VH specifically, so keep that in mind. And you'll notice that for every element, I've set overflow to hidden. Please make that a habit, especially in the showcase. Jesus Christ, like a lot of the projects that I'm seeing are just basically horizontal scroll bars, vertical scroll bars clashing into each other, elements out of the screen, like please, and it wouldn't hurt if you actually gave your showcase a proper fucking name, like we're not asking for too much. Giving it a name of gobbledygook, is kind of like me wearing my underwear, walking into an art gallery and expecting people to take me seriously. Please, people go to these showcases. I love all the creators. I love these projects, but I feel like we need to do a better job presenting them and sharing them with the world. So we're going to go ahead and add a user here. We have 2 blocks. Again, same blocks. Nothing changed. They each have a little bit of padding inside just to move the content in. They have, and this one has a little margin, so you can just move things down if you need to. And inside of it, we have a paragraph. So really all of this content, I didn't even have to really put this into a wrapper. This is the wrapper, and you're just center aligning everything here. And inside of it, what we've done is horizontally align everything. So justifying is fine, it's justified to the left. Aligning to the center, because we want the content to be flowing consistently towards the right. And inside of it, we have a box. We have 1 div. We have inside of it, we have an icon. That's it. On the right, we have an overall div. And we're aligning it. We're just keeping it as is, actually. And we're creating a user. And we have the text below it. And we're good to go. So this is already displayed. This is already aligned to be lined up vertically, so you don't actually need to use flex. It would just essentially achieve, the exact same effect. So we don't need any of that. So let's go ahead. Let's go back. There we go. Now, for the bottom of the footer, let's go to that real quick before we continue. Let's hide this. We have 1 footer with a padding of 100, just to be able to move these buttons just to the right. And we have the flex on. Now in this case, you need a little bit of flex. We're aligning it centered again. Almost every element, most elements I create are always, center aligned like that, just to have that perfect margin and padding. The width is 100% with divs. You always have to assign it, let Webflow know how large this needs to be. In the case of a section, it's automatically 100%. So that it's a section, that's why. It's like a chapter of your story. And the height is just set to 10 VH. The reason I do 10 VH instead of pixels is because if you scroll out or you scroll in or whatever, we want the height to be proportional. So very simple. And again, overflow set to hidden. At the bottom, my friends, the absolute setting, stuff like this. Don't try to do this thing with the grid where it's like, the grid is broken into 3 parts, and at the top I have, the header, and then in the middle I have the content, and the bottom I have the footer. Don't do stuff like that. Just let these elements breathe. Give them the space they need, and it'll make your life so much fucking easier. And then just align it to the bottom, align it to the top. You can align it completely in the screen, whatever you want to do. Up to you. But notice how no matter what setting I did, it's still maintained its proportion because I already aligned it. I made it a width 100%. So that's good. Next, we have the forgot password screen. Let's go there for a second. Boom. So an email is going to be sent here. We have a little bit of text. We have an overall form field, div. Inside we have the text. We have the text field and another field, and that's pretty much it. Nothing special here. And then for the PS4, when you to mimic the messaging and everything that's there, just click in the success page. You just put this text in, and now you have your demo finished. And then you can also do the error if you need that, but you don't really need that stuff, so that's good. Next, let's hop into, let's go ahead and hide this. There we go. Okay. Accepting the terms. This was a little tricky. So figuring out how to get rid of that scroll bar, right? I looked at the forums and everything just to, think, usually you don't hide scroll bars. You want people to see the scroll bar. So in this case, how do we do it? Really simple. You just basically hide, you just basically set the overflow to hidden for the inner elements, or the outer elements rather. So in this case, there's a terms wrapper, okay? Follow me with this. And then you have the hidden, you're setting to hidden so that the elements don't be visible outside of that box. And you have the terms of service inside of it. So here, the terms wrapper itself is 785, okay? And the terms of service is 805. So I'm just giving it that proportion. And now you'll notice that when I get rid of this, now you can see the scroll bar. So again, it's just meticulous. You just have to kind of figure out like, okay, how am I aligning this so everything just fits perfectly. Okay, next. Below it, let's go ahead and set this back. And yeah, so here we go. All scrolling perfectly. And when I was mentioning earlier that your work needs to be meticulous and you have to think about everything, think about this, right? The links, the text. I actually read over this text to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes, because I want to make sure the user actually, when they go over it, just in case, they don't mess it up, and they see everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. And I know that subconsciously a user is going to appreciate that. I read it so much that I actually found mistakes in the terms of service. So maybe they can hire me to do some copywriting for them. So let's go ahead and hide this real quick. Let's go to select an avatar. Here we go. So this is here on the left. What's the layout looking like here? We have the overall page. Again, this is exactly the same. All these pages are the same. I just changed the class so I can easily remember everything. Please use classes correctly. That would really help. You can notice here I spent so much time, just laying everything out that I didn't bother to really go back and just set everything, set up the inner classes. I consider that a mistake on my part. So usually in all of my projects, every single element is just laid out, the way it should be. So here we have these elements over here. We have essentially one header. So every one of these panels, you'll notice, has the exact same element. And it's, again, absolute set to absolute at the top. And inside of it is just the text. Finished. You don't have to really do anything else. Here we have the page, in this case, horizontally aligned to be justified in the center. And we have one div block for the menu that's set up aligned to the left, so you can see everything perfectly aligned over here. A little bit of padding and stuff for the buttons inside of it. We'll go over that in a second. And then we have the grid. So in the grid, if you go into editing mode, again, what is it? Very simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Finished. So we have 6 of them. Overall, we have all these elements just stacked up perfectly, so they're all the same size, so you don't have any problems with them. Finished. And they all have the same, but a simple subclass. So in this case, you can just have the same hover effect on all your elements without having to go one by one and create it. And I remember when I was first getting started with Webflow years ago, like these additional, classes just, I didn't really use that much. So I remember how many manual classes I was creating, which is so annoying. Okay, so we're done with the accepting the terms. And the idea here is no matter what you click on, it's going to take you to the next screen. We're just mimicking the experience. We're not actually going to tie every single one image to the other page, which you could do. If you really want to make it 100% identical, you can absolutely do that. And so when you click on this image, that image reflects in the other page, in the profile image, and that's totally doable. It's just a matter of stacking all of these pictures essentially one on top of the other. We're just not going to do that today, but it's totally possible. Next, we have the get PSN. Here we go. So this was the screen earlier where you want to sign up for a PlayStation account. What are we looking at? One giant vertically aligned box, or obviously div again. And we have a special div that I created just for the title. So you have the logo on the left, you have the title on the right, very simple. And when you go down, just give it like a little bit of padding, whatever you need, like a padding of 100 here. And please use padding. Padding is your friend as well. Use it to just get the look exactly the way you need to feel, exactly the way you want it to be. At the bottom, we have a simple paragraph, have the sentence inside of it, whatever you need. And then one container for the two boxes, the two buttons inside of it. Simple as that. Let's go to the next one. Here, we have the same layout. This is the point I was trying to make to you earlier, that everything is pretty much copy-paste. Laying out the content is the hard part. Getting the icon right, and the text and fonts and everything, so that's the part where you're going to spend most of your time. Here, I put a little bit of the script. This is what I was showing you earlier. We'll talk about the custom code in a second. I'm just giving you a full kind of breakdown because I know you're going to be watching this later as well when it's published, and you're going to be able to see all the elements. Finished here. Next, we have selecting a name. So here, in this case, I basically kept everything inside of the form. So here we have the header, and then in the form block, I just added the pictures and everything else on top of the form. So now again, you just hover over it, and we're just using very simple interaction box shadow on top of behind the box. Now, one little advanced little trick I want to show you is please don't use borders for effects like this, because borders always, the animations are going to be choppy sometimes when you're using them. Especially, you'll notice when you put two elements side by side, you're going to notice how because a stroke is actually an element, like it's creating a new element outside of that inner element, and it's pushing everything around it around. So please use the box shadow religiously for stuff like this. Next, so in the confirm, I just used the form system to just take it to success. And here you already have this. This is exactly what you see in the PlayStation 4. Exactly what you see. And then obviously you don't need the error message. And people, when they use this, they don't realize that, wow, it's just a form element. There's nothing to it. So that's something I'm very I'm trying to show you the simplicity here as much as I can. Next, let's go into the manual sign-in, and then we're almost done. Here we go. So here we got the form block with the email, password, everything else. Now you'll notice when you set something to a password, Webflow doesn't actually use that for anything. Like you have to tie that to a particular backend system, whatever other element that you have created, custom code or whatever. So in this case, I had a saving grace that when you type in the password and you type in email, it doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't go to the next page. It gives up just a warning message saying your password was wrong or something. So it adds a little bit more of realism to the experience. Then we have further at the bottom, of course, we just went over that. Let's bring back the profiles, back to where we started. And now let's go into the share menu. Here we go. So 1 second, you'll notice that actually the share menu is visible, but it's hidden. It's set to absolute. So we're going to a 0% here. We have a different menu. Now, I didn't add this in the prototype because I noticed the share menu doesn't actually have a visual component inside of the PS4. You have to press. It's only on the gamepad in most of the screens. So unfortunately, I worked so hard just getting these icons in Photoshop and editing them, everything, and then I realized, oh shit, I can't actually put this in the prototype. So this is just kind of I just kept it in there because I felt sorry for myself. So let's go put this at 350, and notice again the Z index. Please, a lot of people, they kind of mix this up. Always remember to use the Z index correctly, especially when you're using 3D. Use it really well. Use it smart, intelligently. This can save you so much time. There was one element I was working on. I couldn't find it, years ago when I was first getting to this stuff, and I just couldn't find that element. And I realized, oh shit, it's the Z index problem. So keep things in mind. Let's go ahead and hide the login screen. Let's jump into the home screen here. Okay. Here we're seeing the nav window, the nav bar, okay, right here. Very thin, okay, we're just setting it up, and we're setting it to minus 90 VH. Again, it's relative. So you want to have it, you want to have it all proportionally set up so it never moves. So in this case, actually, sorry, the nav window is the entire one here. I'll show that in a second, 1 second. Okay, so sorry, the nav window is above this one. You remember when the nav bar scrolls down, right? That's the window that's set up there right now, and it's fully visible. You just can't touch it. It's outside of the screen. So that's where you use the VH correctly to just move things up and down. Below it, we have the nav bar, which is, again, just set to a fixed height of 30, which allows all the icons to have that consistency across the board, which is great. Below it, again, 100% width. We want to make sure that nothing's going to be bouncing around, in different resolutions. Everything's laid out correctly. We have the nav shrinker. Okay, so take a look at this. The nav shrinker is an element I had to create at the bottom. So when you click on the nav bar and everything moves down, when you click on the nav shrinker, everything moves back up. Now, you would think you could just do that. You could click anywhere, but actually, no, you can't. Because I've noticed that with interactions, with Webflow interactions, sometimes when you click on, you set up these interactions, they just don't work. Because there are so many elements simultaneously on the page, you have to get tricky with some of those things. So, it can be very frustrating sometimes. And this doesn't happen all the time, obviously, this is rare. But I spent like 2 hours just trying to figure out one thing where it's like, okay, I set everything to hide. It's not hiding. Why isn't this working? So, and then I realized actually it's a stacking problem. Like Webflow sometimes just doesn't like when you align certain interactions in a certain way. So this is where you can call certain people a power user. When that's a very nice way of saying someone who has suffered. We should just call them martyrs. All right, so moving down the screen, let's go to the slider itself. Okay, notice how I set it to a margin of 200, just to move that element to the left, right? And you set a width for it at 1600. Now, for the home screen, the section that I created, it's overflow hidden. So you don't have to, so now the bar that we set up with 1600 width is not going to be creating a 1600 pixel horizontal scroll bar. So now everything is just visible in the screen. And there are very few cases, honestly, guys, that you would need to keep your overflow visible. Honestly, very few cases, unless there's some special animation you want to do or whatever. But you'll notice even when you're doing like interactions, like simple interactions, grow in, fade out, whatever, not custom interactions, just the basic ones that will come with Webflow, it creates these weird bars every time. Like, if you say appear, like if I set this nav bar and I say appear from the top, and it's hidden at the top, it automatically just creates all these bars. So, you have to kind of keep that in mind when you create an experience. And that's how the designer really cared about what they were building. They really put that time and attention to it. So navbar and slider, very simple. We give it a height 350. Now, why 350? Because the boxes have to grow. And if you don't set up the height as a fixed height, sometimes it just gets weird, where the box just, the whole around, it starts moving up, moving down, whatever. So the best way to when you're building something, exactly how it needs to look, give it a fixed width and height. We have the game options menu over here. So again, this is set to 280 hidden, so it's already visible. I'm going to set it to 0, and here you have the buttons and the bars, whatever you need. Just check for updates, whatever. And this is very similar to the other options menu that we already created. So I basically just duplicated it, changed the text in it, and that's it. And that's what makes everything so easy. You don't have to go through code and CSS and be like, duplicate this button, duplicate that button. Here it's just copy paste the entire panel, or the entire window, if you will, change the text, and you're good to go. Okay, almost done here. We have the time that's set, again, absolute. We have to position this perfectly so it appears correctly. That's one of my problems that I have with Webflow is the HTML elements, you can't see it live, so you have to preview it every single time, like publish, preview, and I spend half my time building this just publishing and previewing. So I think over time we'll get over that. Next, we have the footer. Let's go ahead and preview that real quick. The footer, again, is hidden. So here we have, this is what I was creating for the share menu earlier, but I realized that, we don't want to actually have, we don't like this immediately. If I gave you this experience as a prototyper, you would realize that this is not the PlayStation. So I had to dismiss with that. Now, next we have the PlayStation Store. So these are elements that are hidden at the bottom of the screen. So notice how, again, it's overflow hidden, but you can see this is a nice way of editing all your features before publishing them. You can just go in, go down, edit it like it's a website section, because that's what it is. You can set it all up, and you can edit everything, and you're good to go. So here, what are we looking at? We're looking at a bar, a header at the top, okay? 100% 10VH, same as the other headers. We have an overall communities wrapper, okay? That we have the library wrapper overall that has all the elements inside of it. Then we have the communities wrapper. No height, no width, nothing, because we want to set everything manually, right? And then inside of it, we have the events nav bar that's vertically justified to center. So all the buttons appear in the center. And on the right, we have a grid that we set up. Very simple grid, very effective. Now you want to have, if you want to align these elements and control their sizes more meticulously, what you can do is just add more columns or more rows, and in this case, you could just take that, and then you can take this image in the background and just scale it as such. 1 second. And boom, simple as that. So grid is, phenomenal. It's a lifesaver. But know when to use flex, know when to use grid, and know when to use nothing. Don't get too carried away with all these features. Next, we have notifications. Again, simple. We have overall wrapper, and inside of it, we have 4 tabs that are just duplicated. Each one is just given a height of 120, so it's just div box. And you have inside of it, aligned horizontally centered. That's your friend as well, right? We have the picture, we have the thumb, we have the overall div, and then we have the time right next to it. Simple as. And then for the timing, I use absolute. You remember what I was telling you earlier about aligning individual elements just perfectly without having to worry about, is this element going to push that element? Now notice when I'm writing this text, right, here you have text that is shorter, and here you have text that is really long. So obviously if you just horizontally align everything, then all these elements are just going to be bouncing around, and then you have to be like, I'm going to give it a padding of 50. I'm going to give this one padding of 5,000. Just stop that shit. Just get straight to it. And then at the bottom, we have a footer. Inside of it, each individual button wrapper. And inside of it, again, aligned horizontally. Good to go. So this is really the best example of, a box within a box within a box. Look at this. Footer, large box, button box wrapper. Inside of it, 2 boxes. Finished. So really, most of the work you're going to be doing with Webflow, and I'm assuming this is kind of similar on other platforms like Glide and Adalo and these others, where you can just essentially visually just create these elements and move them around. So when they say like, oh, I'm creating a responsive website, what they're really saying is, I'm aligning some boxes. I love how on all these freelancer websites, people just use that to $500 or something, it's like, or thousands if you're really good at your job. So let's go ahead, hide that. Let's go into the events panel. There are some elements here that are actually quite unique in terms of layout. So this is just, again, just the same grid laid out correctly. Some of them just given a stroke, some of them given a grid. And you have the overall panel over here, so that's good to go. And let's go to actually, let me see which element here was actually quite unique. I want to show you. Most of it is not very unique. Obviously, it's very similar. The PlayStation is very consistent. Okay, here, this is actually quite interesting how this was done. We're not going to be creating every one of these elements, guys. That's why I'm kind of going over everything for you real quick. Here we have overall div. We have this div with a little padding. This is where you use padding. And then we have this overall trophies laid out to the right. Now, because this wrapper is going to be exactly the same across the board, and these boxes are going to be exactly the same. Notice I'm not using absolute. I no longer need to. It's already absolute. These elements can't, there's no fidgeting at all. Every element is exactly the same. So really it's just box, 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 big box. Finished. And then finally we have the settings. Right here. And you remember the trick I used for the terms of service. Here you can go ahead and again just hide the nav bar, and you're good to go. Simple as that. Finish with the settings. Boom. Let's go into the power. What is the power? It's just basically here, settings, and it has only one interaction. And the library is a little different. So for the library, I use the same box as the same window as the avatar selection. So really it was the same grid usage. And then in each one, you have a box on the left, a little title, and then this element set to absolute. It saves you so much time, you know, and you don't even need to like create all kinds of boxes and whatever. It's really, it's just you know, creating one element. In this case, it's literally just text. So it's not even an icon, it's just a text field, and I found this icon directly from a website. So you can just go ahead and copy paste it. Saves you a lot of time, and you can copy paste all the elements one by one. Finished. Library's out of the way, and now we have the game. This is really fun. Look at this. I'm gonna go ahead and show you the little secret I did for YouTube. 1 second. Let's see what we're doing here. Okay, where are we? Ah, sorry. I created this thing and I'm still keeping track of all the interactions. So here you have, I set this one to just opacity. There we go. For each element, I just hide them and give it and hide them. I decrease the opacity and I hide them, so then I can have full control over the interaction. Okay. Now, how did I get rid of the YouTube, all this logo and all this kind of stuff? Right. It's actually really simple. You put the embed in the box overall. So again, what we're doing is we're just giving it 100% width, 100% height. We're setting it to overlay. So we're creating another div, okay, that is just set to absolute, and you have the full absolute, right? And 100%, 100% width and height. And then it's on top, you give it a z-index of 3, you know, to just put it higher over the, higher than the embed. You don't have to make it 3, you can just make it 1 if you want, you know, it's up to you. Whatever suits your fancy. And what happens is when you're hovering over this overlay, your mouse, your cursor is not able to touch the YouTube embed. So I've noticed a lot of people, they even in the forums, they're asking, well, how do you integrate some YouTube and get rid of the you know, comments and stuff like that, you know, and all these elements, the watch later and the share and stuff? Well, actually, you don't have to change the embed code. You just put a div on top of it. So it's a little trick. Creating a prototype or something like this is really like a magic show, you know, and being able to have that control over it is really where your skills show, is how you're gonna use which trick at which point, okay? So that's really it. And of course, in the embed, real quick, 1 sec, what I'm doing is I'm saying URL, start at which point. So I pick a nice, you know, active action point inside of the video, so it feels like you're already sucked into the game. Set it to mute, set it to autoplay, and that's it. And you can hide the show player controls, of course. That just helps to hide some of the elements a little more. But overall, you know, I'm not really happy with the YouTube settings, to be honest. I think that Webflow can do a much better job, you know, give you a lot more granular control over like what you can do with your YouTube videos. I mean, it's honestly just embedding their API and, you know, asking your designer to just add a couple of more boxes here, you know, unless, you know, I don't know something. But yeah, that would be really great if you guys could pull that off. Next. Okay, so the game wrapper contains 4 games: the God of War, Batman, Last of Us, and Witcher 3. And you want to be able to, when you click on them, you want one of them to show and hide, right? So you just hide all of them and then set up an interaction. Simple. Let's hide this. Let's go through the PS Store real quick. Here we go. So notice how at the bottom, now we're actually seeing the third and final, you know, primary element of the page. These elements they have to be stuck to the bottom. So what you do is you just set it, instead of pixels, what you do is you set a percentage of the screen, right? So it's 70% down. Now I could go ahead and set this to, you know, 0%. Now it's on the screen. 10%, you know, 60%, whatever. In this case, you know, you just want it to kind of peek out at the user a little bit. So 70% is perfect. Let's go ahead and hide that real quick. And again, it's just a grid, right? Nothing special. Finished. What's new? Let's look at that screen. Here we go. So here we have a little more complicated. We have each box containing more elements and have more, you know, hover effect and stuff. But for most of the effects, guys, the hover effects and stuff, you know, is just basically, you know, as simple as going into here, going to the state, selecting hover, and saying when the user, you know, hovers on this, you know, change its color to whatever. You know, it's really that simple. And you know, again, box shadow and stuff. Most of these are just fading in, a stroke, something like that. So don't use too many custom interactions for stuff like this. It's just unnecessary. I've seen some projects, you know, that I cloned on Webflow that were in the showcase, and I just looked at it, I was like, Jesus, this person suffered. You know, there's so many simpler ways to do this. So a lot of the time, you know, even for advanced users such as myself and others in the community, who I love the honesty that the community has. That yeah, sometimes even something as simple as, you know, like how do I lay out these elements or whatever, you know, you might come across a trick you didn't think about, like it didn't cross your mind, like, oh shit, I could have done this so much easier. So I think like I like to always go back and watch, you know, other videos in the community, even simple like how-tos, which is why I actually suggested on Twitter that I would do like 60 seconds, like how I create a cursor, and I can just show you, not sped up, but actually like in 60 seconds, you could create almost all of these elements, a box, or, you know, a duplicatable, clonable, you know, little animation or whatever. So yeah. Next, we have the game splash. Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't actually click on this. So, but the idea was that when you actually click on it, I want to go back to the prototype real quick. Here we go. When you click on here, like the game itself, when you click the second time, what I did was to avoid the clicking problem, right? Let me mention this real quick as well. When I click on God of War, it's supposed to move me to God of War, but it's not supposed to immediately start the game, right? So that's why what I did was I used a double click method, where it's like click once, it opens this, click twice, opens the game. So very simple interaction, but you know, sometimes you get tunnel vision when you're building these prototypes, and it can get really complicated for no reason. So now here's the animation. This is what I wanted you guys to see, is when you click on it, boom, you see how the picture just shows up, you get the game, and you have boxes in here, you have a little pop-up, whatever, you know, like stuff like that. And you have the you know, the cloned little loading icon. Again, it's just a fade in, fade out effect for the image. So nothing big there. But, you know, it's important for you to keep in mind how even the simplest things are done. So then you can use that, you know, add that little trick to your arsenal the next time. Here we have very simple, just a grid. We're not going to go over that too much. And here we have the notification. So we were just talking about that earlier. There you go. So it just comes in. So we set it to minus 250. So the way this works is, again, if the width is 250, just move it, you know, 250 to the side. If it has a stroke or anything like that, maybe just give it, you know, like a little more just to get it completely out of the way. But usually, you know, this is perfect. And just a little bit of margin. So let's bring that back real quick. What do we see here? We see 2 divs stacked on top of each other. Very simple, just vertically aligned, you know, and just positioned to stretch. So everything is stretched out and it's center aligned. And here you have inside of each div, there are individual elements. So Flex can be very fast. Sometimes Grid is super slow. It's not always efficient to use Grid. So don't have any dogmas of like, you know, Webflow told me to do it this way. You know, like Webflow doesn't tell you anything. That's what I like. It just wants you to do your best work. And then for put to rest, here we go. We have that final screen. We have the text. We have the animations here. Everything just laid out. 2 separate divs. Beautiful. And finally, you have the main interaction where after you're finished, it takes you out to the power on that we were just talking about earlier. That little icon. Really, that's all it is. It's just one icon with a reload page, little symbol in there. And it has the JavaScript embedded directly into it. So what I've done is I've set the JavaScript. Here we have the href, which takes you, this is really all you need, right? So I don't even consider this, to be honest with you guys, I don't even consider this custom code or something. You know, this is like baby language. You know, this is very simple. Like first you set up the link. This is where it's supposed to go. Div style, you know, it's this and this. And then, you know, when you click, you know, this happens. It's really, really simple. And of course, this is tied to custom code, and I'll show you that in a second as well. Okay, 1 second. Let's not do that. Let's come here. Okay, it's already hidden. Good. So put to rest is finished. Let's go hide that as well. And then we have the background. Okay, so we have the video, which is really just a video. And behind it, we have the music. Now, you might be wondering, well, Webflow doesn't support music. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know why. I mean, you guys, come on, move it. Let's get that done. There's so many amazing things that I could do if you allowed me to integrate a music player. I'm sure that's in your wish list. So, you know, get that to us if you can. Next. So yeah, the music element is not actually in Webflow. I've tied it to SoundCloud, basically. So I actually uploaded a SoundCloud. I uploaded music. I found the music, a 10-minute loop of the music, and I tied it to SoundCloud. And then I took SoundCloud and I embedded it into my project, and I set it to loop. I set it to autoplay, and then I just hit the element. So when they say, you know, like magician this and, you know, like that, yeah, that is, I take that as a compliment. Like, that is what it is. You know, I'm able to basically just use every trick I have in the book. You know, like, think about some of the most complicated magic tricks in the world, right? I love that there's some YouTube channels that do that. They just break it down. Like, how the hell did you do that? You were here, then you appeared over there. In reality, the best magic tricks, the best design tricks are super fucking simple. So you just have to kind of, don't complicate it in your head. Don't get, you know, too caught up in how am I going to do this. So let's hide the home screen. I hope you enjoyed that. Let's go into the custom code section real quick. I want to show you what I did here. So obviously you want to, you know, setting up the open graph and everything, giving it a title. And then below we have a couple of lines here. I want to give you an idea. So first here for the clickability, notice how when I go to, let's say, you know, let's go to webflow.com. Let's go to my profile real quick. All right. Here's one of the problems. You see this shit? Yeah, I can select everything. Now, in a case of a website, yeah, you want to be able to select this stuff. You know, you give people the stuff. But when you're creating a prototype, you're creating MVP, you're creating, you know, creating this experience. I personally think you should not be able to select everything on the page. I think it just reeks of website. It just shouts out that this is web development. You know, so what I want to do is I want to essentially disable clicking anywhere on the website, like dragging any text. So all I did was I added just a little bit of this, you know, styling. So here on cursor, the cursor element that we had, that little icon, I just gave it a name, a class, I mean. The pointer event is none, so nothing happens. And then in the body, again, what you're saying is when the user touches or selects or drags or whatever the hell they're doing, nothing should happen. And then we have the here it's continuing. So selector, you know, when the cursor doesn't select anything, very simple. Then we also have this little element, which I would strongly suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that you use this across all of your projects, please. This, when I'm here, right, and I can just drag this, I can just kind of, well, this might not be a good example. 1 second, I wonder. Yeah, see this thing where I'm ghosting, right, as they call it. This element just follows you around. You don't want that in a prototype. So you don't want that in in websites. It just kind of distracts you. Like you should be able to click. My philosophy is you should be able to click on things that were meant to be clicked on. So what I've done is I've added this little image here. So all images, when user drags, user tries to touch it or whatever, nothing happens. It's stuck. Simple as that. And then of course you have the overall element for the JavaScript for reloading the page and everything. So that's here as well. You can see some of that stuff. Very simple. And that's about it. That's pretty much the whole layout here. And you have all these different classes, of course. So when I say hundreds of elements, I just want to show you that it is hundreds of elements. And I want to give you a little tour of the interactions panel because we're not going to be creating every one of these interactions. So here, I'm going to go click here, start animation, and there you go. This is what it looks like to do my job. It's more like slave labor. It's not really a job. And a lot of these elements are stacked quite frequently. So if you go, for example, to, let's say, expand game splash, this is very simple. But if we do something like intro, let's go into, let's say signing in, for example, right? You want to change panels. I mean, this is what it looks like, like this one scales out. This one's, this one is by default big. When user, when the animation starts, let's say user clicks, the get PSN page automatically scales from, 1.2. It goes down, then it hides. The button wrapper, shows, like it's just backwards and forwards, just keeping track of everything. So that's what makes this a pain in the ass, is just keeping track of every single interaction and making sure this is fluid, making sure nothing is overlapping anything, and going from there. So let's go ahead and close this. We're done looking. I get Vietnam flashbacks every time I look at the interactions panel. So now let's go ahead and create some of these elements real quick, okay? And I'm going to show you just how fast this is. Really, the intro was the long part. Creating it is easy as hell. Once you have everything laid out, it's a piece of cake. So I'm going to keep referring back so you can see like what elements go where and how it actually works. So let's go and start off with a preloader, okay? For the background, we're going to recreate this element first. So I'm going to go jump in real quick, hide this, boom, create a section, call it background, okay? And we're going to give it a height of 100 VH. Finished. Inside of this, we're going to set this, first of all, by the way, to relative. So it's relative to the body. And that means that whatever, it's nested within it, basically. And it's going to be nested to the primary element, no matter what other divs and boxes and sections and interactions we create. So this way, when you're clicking, especially when you're creating your website, if there's an element you don't actually need, you know how in Photoshop you have locking elements? In Webflow, you just hide the element. Simple as that. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a -1, okay? And now, see, now it's gone. I can just go in here. I can create a video element, okay? And just go down here at the very bottom, background video. And I'm going to just set this video to 100 VH. Now, since I already have video, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it. Boom. Put it inside the background, sorry, not in the body. And there we go. Now we're going to go ahead and preview it. And you guys can follow along if you go to ps4-webinar.webflow.io. You're going to be able to see it live. Okay, there we go. Simple as that. 10% of the prototype complete. Next, we're going to go to the music side. So to create that element, again, you just have to create an HTML embed. So I'm going to go ahead and just do some of this manually for you. We're going to go drag this element directly in. Boom. And we're going to call this sound. Okay. And we're going to set it hidden because it's not an actual, it's not an actual element. But in this case, actually, you don't need to. One sec. Here we go. I'm going to copy the code. This is the SoundCloud stuff. Let me see real quick. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy paste it in. Let me set it there for default. Okay, finished. There you go. And sorry, you don't need any of this stuff. Okay, it's good. Give this 100% as well, just in case. Okay, there was a little, you see that little hiccup Webflow just did there? That it's just, you don't see these options? Yeah, so it's little things like that. From time to time, you might be, don't get frustrated. So sound is hidden, you can't click it. And now we're gonna preview again. Beautiful, we have the music now. We're gonna go ahead and now create the cursor. I'm gonna do this completely manually, just to show you just how easy this stuff is, especially with interactions and stuff, right? Let's go ahead. You can create a div or a section, in this case, let's go ahead and create a section and give it 100 VH. And now you'll see that, I'm scrolling down, right? Well, that's because the background actually is not supposed to be relative. It's supposed to be absolute. So a little trick over there. There we go. Now we're going to put this at the top. We're going to call this cursor. Okay. And again, notice because both of them are sections, you also need to give it absolute. So now it's absolutely proportioned behind every other element. In the cursor, we're going to add an image. So in this case, I'm just going to copy the image from here, from the library. In this case, I could just clone the element. So this is a good demonstration, actually, of clonability, that I can just add it in, finished. Now I have my icon, and it's already added into my library. Finished, good to go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the custom code, just so we have everything in place. There we go. I mean, I can copy all of it because we're going to be using it anyways. Boom. Okay. And just a little bit here for one of the features. Okay. If I remember correctly, that was for the timer element. Okay, there we go. Now, for the actual animation side, what I've done is, you'll notice on the body here, we have two sections, okay? We have the element triggers and we have page triggers. So I could set up this animation to be an element trigger. So if you hover over the cursor anywhere in this window, the mouse is gonna move, right? That doesn't really make sense. So what I've done is I've set actual page introduction. So here we have like the mouse move in viewport. We're gonna go and create, here we have the cursor itself. And all we're doing is setting this to 50 minus 50 VW. So when the mouse moves 50% to the left from the center, right? Everything is centered here when you're using the axes, when you're moving everything around the screen. Then the mouse moves to the left, perfectly to the left, and stops. It doesn't go out of the screen, it just stops right there. It's 50%. If you make it 55, whatever, then it's going to start getting weird. And again, this is for window. The x-axis is the width, and then you have the height. So to create this would take me less than 60 seconds. It's very easy to do. Just go to body, jump down to the page trigger. I'm going to go ahead and page load, action, add it, cursor, add move element. So I'm going to go ahead and select, or actually, no, 1 second. Sorry, guys. Yeah, okay. Sorry, 1 second. Mouse move in viewport, not page load. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Yep, here we are. So we're going to add a move element for the mouse, minus 50 VW, and and then just 50 pW. Duplicate the same thing. Boom. And now just change it to the y-axis, minus 50, VH, and plus VH. A lot of people are suffering with these custom cursors. You know, they're trying to do GIFs and SVGs and all this kind of stuff. Like, just, it's really simple. So yeah, there it is, simple. And now we can go preview it real quick. And there you go. Now notice, we are seeing the mouse. We don't want both of them, right? We don't need two of these guys. And in case you were wondering, for our new users, the Webflow users, we're going to have, let's say, you know, A/B smoothing. What that means is that there's going to be a delay when I'm moving it. So that's a nice little trick to use. That's a nice little trick to use when you're creating your prototype or your website. Okay, now we have the cursor. Next, we're going to go ahead and create this particular screen. Create the power on. Just go. Cursor is already set to. You have to make sure, again, remember guys, you got to just make sure it's set to absolute. So we're going to set this to, let's say, you know, 10. If you can say whatever you like. I like to use anything between like 10 to 50, depending on, you know, how many elements there are, just to have that range. When you do it really close, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's kind of hard to remember which one was a 9, which one was a 10. So, you know, having this kind of 10, 20, 30 kind of approach is, I think, pretty smart. Okay, set it in the middle. So now the cursor is set to absolute, and we're finished with that. Okay, finished. Now we're going to go ahead and create the next page. Create a div, set this up, give it 100 VH. Sorry. Boom. 100%. We're going to call this black intro. There we go. We're going to make it dark. Give it a color. There we go. Finished. For the elements, we have an intro wrapper. So remember what we discussed earlier. So you know, it's stacked within each other. So we have the start box. We have the dark. We have the start, and then we have the trigger. So we're going to very quickly. We're going to just drop a div. You can just drop it in. You can also use, you know, search functions, whatever. You can easily, you know, add them in. I like to use. I like to just do everything manually, to be honest. So here we're going to select the black intro. We're going to set it to what it's supposed to be here. Okay, 1 second. Where is this? Yeah, okay. So the div block needs to go in this one. Here we go. And now we need to center the block. So simple. To now select this, we need to make sure. Okay, we need to make sure, first of all, that, see, you have a problem here, right? The cursor itself is set to 10, which means that when you try to select these other layers, you can't, right? So actually, what we need to do is keep it at absolute, but set this one to just 0, and set the actual icon to 30. And this way, you can have full control again of what you're doing. And I think in a lot of cases, you actually don't even have to worry about setting it. You don't have to worry about setting a lot of this stuff manually. 1 second. Okay, we're done with here. Now, for the black intro, we have the element inside. We're going to just bring this up a little bit. Let's go ahead and give it a relative. Okay, so now this element is kind of falling behind. So what we need to do is set it to absolute, but we don't give it a z-index at all. See? So it's like, this is where it gets, you know, you have to kind of keep in mind of what you're doing. So I'm purposefully showing you some of these examples so you know where you might go wrong, or where, you know, you might get a little confused. All right, in the div, we just need one image. So I'm just going to copy the logo real quick. It already has a height. And we're going to drop it in. There you go. Now notice how we already have that finished. Now we're going to align this correctly. Align to vertical. Give it some, give the div block center aligned, so we can just center everything within it.